what it takes today to live a long and healthy life, it's so multifaceted. And nutrition is definitely, it plays a major role in that regard, but it's just one part of the puzzle. And so whereas Genius Foods, my first book, I consider to be sort of the ultimate nutritional care manual for the human brain, having a brain that functions as well as it ought to requires a lot more than just healthy eating today, unfortunately. I mean, I wish it was as easy as eating, a handful of blueberries and wild salmon and, some nuts here and there, but actually, the modern world is sort of like the Hunger Games for the human brain. And I know you love the movie references. And we're being attacked from every which way, from, the industrial chemicals which we are confronted with on a daily basis, many of which we've been exposed to for the entirety of our lives, to the fact that, leisure time physical activity is at an all-time low, to the fact that our food supply has become saturated with ultra-processed foods, to the fact that our circadian clocks are completely out of whack. So the Genius Life, I really explore all of the facets of what it takes to live healthy. I include nutrition and diet as well. But it's really packed with sort of the little changes that you can make in your day-to-day life that are going to have big wins in terms of your health.
When you were doing the research, what was something that really surprised you?
Well, I think it was kind of, it was scary, the degree to which the odds are stacked against the average human. And that was very eye-opening. But it was also simultaneously...
What stacks the odds against us?
Well, just the fact that, whether it's access to healthy food or air pollution or, the industrial chemicals that we use to clean or even create our domiciles, our homes, we're inundated with exposures that are not doing our biology any favors. So that's what I mean. I mean, today, it's frightening when you look around. You see people that are, struggling with overweight, with being obese. 66% of the population is either overweight or obese. Half of the population is either pre-diabetic or has type 2 diabetes, which we know both of those conditions is actually a late marker for chronically elevated insulin or hyperinsulinemia, which can go on for years, if not decades, before your blood sugar actually starts to inch up, to a degree that a doctor would measure it. People are not well. If you live to the age of 85, you have a 1 in 2 chance of being diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Certain cancers are increasing in their frequency. In the 1960s, a woman's lifetime risk of developing breast cancer was 1 in 20. Today, it's about 1 in 8. So there's obviously been a mutation in our environments. Our genes haven't changed all that much. And yet the default state for any organism is health. But you look around and people are not healthy. People are not feeling well. When you look in the mirror, I want your listeners to kind of introspect for a minute and ask whether or not you feel healthy, whether or not you feel virile and vital and well. And I wrote this book and I became obsessed with this topic and really communicating this message to anybody who will listen ultimately, because my mom was so sick. And I feel in many ways that she was the canary in the coal mine for the modern way of life.
Reading the book, I didn't realize that she died of cancer. So yeah. I knew obviously from your last book, from talking to you, that she had dementia early, which is fucking terrifying. But then to hear that she got cancer on top of that is pretty gnarly. If you going through that process, what was that like as you're researching the book and you're obviously getting clues as to what is bombarding her? How do you process through that? How do you think about that?
Yeah. All I have are hypotheses, so I'll never claim to know what was the cause of either my mom's dementia, which she developed at a very young age, at the age of 58, or the fact that over Labor Day of 2018, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. Ironically, in both instances, with both diagnoses, what I experienced in every doctor's office that I, went to with my mom was diagnose and adios. In both scenarios, the treatment options that were afforded to my mom were very limited. With dementia, anybody with a loved one with dementia will tell you that you get prescribed these biochemical Band-Aids, and they do very little in terms of disease management. They certainly have no disease-modifying effect. My mom was on all of the drugs that were available to her for her memory function. And then my mom happened to have a particularly gnarly form of cancer. She developed pancreatic cancer. And we realized this when over Labor Day, she turned yellow, which is, if you can turn yellow. There's probably two major reasons why a person would turn yellow. One is if you're eating too much beta carotene, and then your skin turns yellow, but not the eyes, the whites of your eyes. Then there's another condition called jaundice, which is when your skin and your eyes turn yellow, and that's because bilirubin, which is the pigment that is released into your digestive tract, which gives stool its color, that dark yellow, almost brownish color, isn't able to flush out and then backs up. It seeps into your skin, it seeps into the whites of your eyes, and that can be caused by, generally speaking, one of two conditions. One, a gallstone, and that's what we were all praying that my mom had. But when they did the MRI of my mom's abdomen, what it turns out she actually had was a tumor on her pancreas that was pressing into her bile duct. And pancreatic cancer, I believe 90-something% of the time is diagnosed when it's already in an advanced stage. And that was certainly true for my mom. When it was diagnosed for my mom, she was already in stage 4, which means that the cancer had already spread. They found lesions on her liver. And, my mom's quality of life at that point was already so degraded due to the dementia and the Parkinsonian symptoms that she also had, the movement symptoms, the stiffness. But still, I thought that I was going to have my mom. You never think to yourself that your mom is not going to be here, in any way that's, that transmits the urgency of a terminal illness. And when my mom was diagnosed over Labor Day, because it was already in stage 4, and because my mom was already so ill with her dementia, there was nothing that they could offer her. And so they gave us a prognosis of 3 to 6 months. Immediately she went into hospice care.
Was she able to grasp what was happening?
It's really hard to say. The cognition was really constrained at that stage. There were a few windows of lucidity. I remember clear as day, when they did the surgery to unblock the bile duct, they put a stent in so that the bilirubin can then go into the, can properly drain into the GI tract. After that, before that surgery, she could barely speak. There was basically no communication, and her cognition really was affected to a significant degree. The other thing is that bile is how and we could talk about this later in the episode, is how one of the major routes of excretion of toxins. So if you have dementia and then you have this bilirubin back up into the blood, it's basically it's hyper toxic to the brain. And so when they stented that bile duct and suddenly, her color began to return to normal, there was like a day or two where she seemed almost normal. It was shocking. But ironically, we didn't tell her about the diagnosis.
Really?
In those immediate hours following the diagnosis, because we wanted to be sure that it was what it was. And when they do a diagnosis with MRI, it's not certain until they do a biopsy. In my mom's case, they thought that it was, that it was pretty clear, but we were just so sensitive to my mom and the mood, and life had just become so difficult for her and all of us that we wanted to be sure that it was what it was. And so we had to wait for the biopsy. They took cells when they performed that stenting procedure, and lo and behold, a week or two later, they confirmed that it was cancer. And that's when we told my mom. And when we told my mom, it was heartbreaking. I don't think that she understood what she had, but it didn't hit her the way that it would hit you or I. She made a couple of comments, that were just truly heartbreaking. I mean, how do you tell your mom that she's dying? Like, that's the most difficult conversation that I think any human being can possibly have, or any loved one for that matter. I mean, it's just inconceivable. Like the whole thing to me to this day is still unbelievable. I can't believe it. It feels like a nightmare. It doesn't feel like real life. But we told her, and her cognition, started to begin a slow and gradual decline again. She made a comment once that just, I'll never forget it. It was a testament to her, to how much she loved me and my brothers. I have 2 younger brothers. But it's also, and how much she loved us, but it just so clearly shows you how evil dementia can be. She said something, after we told her about the diagnosis, she started crying and she said, "What am I going to do without you guys?" As if we were going somewhere, it was clear that it wasn't clicking or that something was being lost in translation because, it sounded like we were going somewhere. But in reality, she was going somewhere. And I was thinking in the back of my head, what are you going to do without us? What the F are we going to do without you? And yeah, it was, those were the worst 3 months of my entire life. I can't even, it was just awful. It was wrought with pain and, the palliative care is just, being there for somebody in that condition and having to drop, take a dropper of morphine and administer it to it. It's just like, it's awful. I don't think human beings should have to deal with that. It made me, more interested in physician-assisted suicide and things like that, because not that we would have pulled that trigger, but the very end, it was terrible. It was awful.
Dude, so my cousin died of cancer, really aggressive cancer. He was super fucking young, like mid-20s. And I went to see him a couple days before he died. And I thought the same fucking thing. I'm sitting there in the hospital and I was impressed because his mentality was, I will never give up, not to the bitter fucking end. And I respect that, dude. I respect that. That's my fucking mindset. Like all the way, get across the finish line, do whatever the fuck it takes. And I'm watching him though, literally struggle for every single fucking breath of air. And I'm just asking, like, where is this going? And at what point do you say, actually, what I want is peace. I want to rest. And I get it. Like when there's any element of maybe if I just fight hard enough, I can pull out of this. And like you said, I don't know, would I pull the trigger? I really think in my own case, I would. And when I look at, and I don't know enough about Robin Williams' case to know how deep he was into the disease and all that, but like, I kind of get it, man. Like there's just no joy to be had at the end for anybody. And at some point to me, like I'm not a person who thinks that if all that's left is extreme suffering, that the life still makes sense. I think that's a choice the person should get to make for themselves 100%. Like I would never make that decision for somebody else, but fuck me, man, for my own sake. If I had been in his position watching it, I'd be like, yeah, this is a no brainer. Like I want to kiss everybody goodbye. I want to have one last laugh and thank you, but good night. Like that is just the only thing that makes sense to me, having witnessed that. Now going through it, maybe I'll feel different. Maybe like that sense of fighting is the right answer, but whoa, like from the outside, it looked super, super gnarly.
It's super gnarly. There are things you see that you just change you, the fact that I'm not more traumatized from it is almost a shock, because it's just, you witness things that are so barbaric, so inhuman. I was there with my mom until the end. To witness somebody dying, and not just somebody, but the person who you love more than anybody, any human being on earth, fade away. It's just, it's gutting to the nth degree. There's really no words. And the hospice nurses that worked with my mom, they were angels. They were amazing, but it reaffirmed to me the value of taking care of yourself while you can. In the words of John F. Kennedy, the time to fix the roof is when the sun is shining, because when you're sick, it's a lot harder to undo years of damage that oftentimes we do to ourselves. Not all the damage is something that we have agency over. As I mentioned, the modern world, we're flush up against myriad industrial chemicals that are probably not helping the cause, but you really have to do what you can while you're young and healthy to avert these kinds of conditions. And it's been just this lifelong journey of trying to unravel what it was about my mom's life, my mom's circumstances that led to her becoming so ill. Was she just a genetic fluke that she was so ill for so long? I don't think so. I mean, you know, and I hope not, because that wouldn't bode very well for my health. But yeah, I mean, I think we really ought to do what we can. And so that's why I've dedicated myself to learning and communicating as best as I can these principles.
Yeah. And I want to hear how you sort of rebound from that. And if you're doubling down on the work and that's a way out, because I had my former roommate from college, he was on a path. It was really interesting to see where he was going to go, producing film, like the whole nine. And then his mom got a brain tumor. And in the removal of the brain tumor, she basically developed dementia-like symptoms and was type 2 diabetic. And watching him go through that, it changed him so fundamentally. And he 180'd on his life, just changed everything up, moved, took a totally different path. And when he was going through it, like he had this daily heartbreak. So she's got dementia, so she doesn't remember anything, but she's type 2 diabetic. So he has to be on her about what she's eating. And he was like, dude, you can't imagine what it's like every day to have to retell my mom that she's a type 2 diabetic and that she can't have the things that she wants because she keeps coming and asking for a glass of orange juice or whatever. And he's like, every day I have to tell her again that she can't have it. And it was like, you know, you just get to the point where you're asking that same fundamental question. At what point is her quality of life so low that none of this makes sense anymore? And to watch him go through that, like you said, to see the person you love most in the world fading away, like it's gnarly. And so I lost touch with him at that point. He just went off the radar. This is all pre-social media. So I'm curious, like as you're going through that, how do you rebuild? Like what is your coping mechanism been?
I'm so great. You know, I mean, people love to bash on social media, but the fact that I've been so transparent and open about my motivations and my story with my followers, the fact that they were there to send feedback and love and this, you know, this outpouring of love, I really felt it when I was going through that and my mom passed away. I have channeled a lot of the angst about losing my mom into my work. I'm very lucky that I get to do that I get to write about it, that I get to feel creatively expressed. In many ways, although my work is about health and science and nutrition and all that stuff, I also feel very much like an artist. And I think what artists are is that what they do is they transmute pain. They take pain and they turn it into something meaningful. And I've done that pretty much my whole life. I've been, when I went through heartbreak in I think it was around 2008, it inspired me to become a musician because I found that music was a great way to communicate the pain that I was feeling in regards to my heart being broken. When my mom started going through this, the best way that I knew to deal with it in a way that made me feel like this wasn't all going to be in vain was to use it to help and inspire other people to live healthier and to learn more about their bodies, about their biology. And my intention really has never been to be called an expert, a health expert or anything like that. It was really to be an example for people, because I don't believe that you need to be a PhD or an MD or a registered dietitian to understand how your body works and how how your food interacts with your biology, and how light interacts with your biology, and how exercise and sleep and all these things that are so crucial when it comes to living well. I think it's a disservice to humanity to expect these incredible knowledge bases that we have thanks to science to be siloed off into their respective academic fields. And so my own curiosity, my own thirst for knowledge about these topics, especially in the wake of my mom's sickness and ultimately her passing, I've been for the past better part of a decade insatiable about trying to understand why this would have happened to her and what I could do to prevent it from happening to myself. So that's been a really great outlet. It's sort of like an intellectual punching bag, because science is so complex. it's so nuanced and it's so dense, and there's so much to learn, you know, and there's just like, there's no way that you're going to be able to understand everything, but trying to wrap your head around the conceptual vastness of our biology and health as a whole. It's a project that, you know, that it doesn't end. And so it's been, to be able to pour myself into that and to be able to do it now professionally, for a living, it's just, I'm eternally grateful to people who have supported my work. And I only hope that it provides, you know, inspiration, for others.
It's interesting that you call yourself an artist, because reading the book, which is dense with very useful scientific information, there were parts in the book where you talk about things like rapamycin that I've heard other people talk about, but you talk about it in a way that was accessible and made it easier for me to sort of grasp and understand, and mTOR and all that stuff, which is super fucking fascinating, but you make it accessible. And there was a part in the book where I felt like the human come through into the whole equation, where you were talking about diet and its impact and all that. But you said, you know, at the end, when my mom was really struggling, man, my trips were to the bakery and getting her things that she loved. And I thought, fuck, that's so interesting. I'd be curious to hear, like, in that, like, the book I want you now to write is the, like, how you deal with this stuff. Because I feel like you dealt with that artfully. Your ability to speak on it is incredible. The fact that you invited your followers in on that journey and all that stuff was really, really cool. So why? Because that is exactly what I would do. And I would feel a little guilty about it. But it's like, if I knew the end was nigh for someone that I cared about and they wanted the exact thing that I thought was problematic, I'd still give it to them.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a really important question to ask, and it's another area where I've just learned so much, you know, about health communication and diet because of what I went through with my mom. So, you know, what you're referencing is the fact that, and I think a lot of people in the health space, and especially in the keto community, whenever the term cancer comes up, people are, you know, can be very zealous about, you know, putting people on this ketogenic diet, which is supposed to starve the cancer cell. And the reality is it's not that easy. Like, cancer cells are notorious for mutating and using alternate energy substrates when they have to. And, you know, if you were in an earlier stage of cancer, maybe that would be something that could be potentially available to you. You know, Dr. Walter Longo at USC is doing, you know, amazing work on the role of fasting and how fasting can potentially sensitize a patient, a tumor cell or a tumor rather, to chemotherapy while protecting the patient. So there's all these amazing things going on in the world of nutrition, and ketogenesis as it relates to cancer and all that stuff. But when you have somebody who's in a later stage of cancer, they're battling against something called cachexia, which is extreme muscle wasting. And so for that patient, you really want to, that patient, what they need most is just calories. And when a patient has no appetite, well, how are you going to get them to eat unless it's a really delicious food?
Is that why you were doing it? Because when I read that, I actually read it totally differently. So I assumed it was, man, I can bring a little joy into her world. Because look, obviously, depending on where we're at in the journey, the answer is very different. So if it's, you know, somebody's just being diagnosed and there's a shot that they can get out of this, like, fuck, I'd have them in the gym, eating perfectly, doing the fasting, like the whole fucking rigmarole.
Yeah.
But once we're like, yo, there's no reversing this. Like, we know we're at the end. Then it's like, hey, bring on what little joys you can. Yeah. And that's what I thought you meant in the book when you said that. But you were just trying to battle cachexia?
Well, it was both to bring her joy. It was that. I would go to my mom's favorite pastry shop in New York, which is called Viniero's on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. And I would buy her cannolis and strawberry shortcake because I know that those were my mom's favorite things to eat. And I knew that there was no dietary intervention in the world that was going to help my mom at that point. And for somebody who has no appetite, cancer patients don't have an appetite. They can barely, you know, eat. You really want to get them the foods that are going to just provide calories, energy, just so that they don't completely waste away. I had around that time, I learned kind of the hard way, or not the hard way, but a lot of people love to hate on Ensure, which is this like sugar slurry of, you know, unhealthy oils and whatever. But it's, you know, Ensure is is marketed on the one hand probably to older adults, as a protein supplement. And for that purpose, I think that that's, not a good product. I wouldn't use it for that. But on the other hand, if it's a product that's engineered to be as palatable as possible while providing, your basic level of multivitamin support, then maybe that's going to be a better option than trying to cram a protein shake down a cancer patient's throat that's not going to be as palatable. And so I began buying.
Interesting, man.
It's super interesting. I would buy my mom, for example, protein shakes because I was like, all right, we got to fight cachexia. We got to keep the protein intake high because we know that that's going to, help maintain muscle, which we know, eating higher amounts of, first of all, protein's essential, and my mom was barely getting any. So I was, on the one hand, I wanted her to have a higher protein option. But those kinds of shakes, especially when they're low carb, they're sweetened with artificial sweeteners that are just not as palatable as sugar, unfortunately. And though I would never drink an Ensure shake, and I wouldn't, recommend its consumption to anybody who was healthy, it's something that my mom enjoyed more and would drink more of than the protein shake that I tried to get her to drink.
Right.
And so that's kind of that's a mind fuck, really, because at the end of the day, you're trying to basically put calories into a person's mouth, and they're withering away at an unforced, at a rate that you just can't conceive of, because the cancer is just so hungry. And so when I would go to the pastry shop, I wasn't about to try to put my mom on a ketogenic diet. You're past that point. You've reached the escape velocity, at which point you really just need to think about survival. You're not thinking about fighting the cancer. You're just trying to buy days, weeks if you're lucky, but really days.
Are there places in America where assisted suicide is legal?
I believe
in Oregon?
Oregon is the one state that I know of, yeah.
That's interesting. That's one of those things, man. I'm sure there are people that understand sort of the way religion works its way through America and law that get why it's illegal, but I don't fucking get it. I legitimately do not understand how people are weird about that. If somebody certainly of sound mind decides that's what they want to do, then I don't get how that's illegal.
I'm not going to say that I would have even brought that up to my mom. I don't know if she would have been into it. It's
even just abstracting it from your mom, that just seems to me like a self-evident thing that you should be able to do that if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
First of all, you're not going to stop people. If they want to do it, they're going to do it. And then second, to make them do horrific, stupid shit. I get it, man. I wouldn't want people to do it. I certainly wouldn't want people to do it because it's a mood disorder. But, oh man, if you have a terminal illness.
Well, even if it was just a few hours earlier, but then, all of the hours that I had with my mom, I've spent many, many, many hours thinking to myself since my mom's passing how much I would have appreciated even another second or two with my mom. So, I'm not going to say that that's an easy decision to make. And actually, if you think about it in a way, when you start giving higher doses of morphine, that is in a way physician-assisted suicide because morphine suppresses your respiratory system. And so the more pain there is, the more morphine you start getting. There's some suggestion in the literature that morphine actually accelerates, a person's demise. It's a horrible drug, but it's one of the best, if not the best, or it's one of the best pain relievers that we have. There are stronger drugs, but it's dehumanizing and it's crazy. And I'm so grateful that my mom was able to be in her own bed when it happened, and that we had the hospice nurses that we had, and that me and my brothers were there for her. But it was terrible. So and I'm not alone. So many people are struggling with illness, cancer-related deaths, Alzheimer's, dementia, and so my heart goes out to them. It's a terrible thing, and I think we ought to support scientific research. We have to, because we're still a long way away from knowing what causes cancer in each cancer type alone. But then in each individual patient, it's probably a different slew of insults that lead to the creation and growth of tumors. And so got to support the science, but also I think it's important to also try to live in a way that is going to minimize your risk.
One of the things you talked about in the book that it's been on my radar for a while, but I know very little about it, is environmental toxins. What are some of the big things that people should be avoiding? What are the ones that are just fucking ever present?
So environmental toxins, I talk about this quite a bit in the book, and unfortunately I don't really have a strong sense of how they would have related to what my mom developed. But certainly there are certain cancers in the body that are sensitive to the way our hormones fluctuate. Breast cancer, prostate cancer would be the two primary examples. But generally speaking, we're inundated with industrial pollutants, whether it's the fine particulate matter in the air that we breathe. If we live in, a polluted city, many Americans live in, in polluted areas.
Do air filters work?
Air purifiers can work. HEPA filters, a HEPA vacuum, and a HEPA air filter is one of the best ways of removing fine particles from the air. PM 2.5 is essentially what it's called. It's the most dangerous.
What's PM 2.5?
It's basically the measurement of the particles. So there's PM 10.
Is PM size?
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
particulate
not a
matter
type.
2.5. I believe it's nanometers.
Okay, so the smaller, the more dangerous.
The smaller, the more dangerous.
Which is why vaping is bad?
Vaping's not good for you, although...
But is that part of what the beef is? Is that it's such a fine particle size?
That's not why vaping is bad. Vaping is bad, I think, because of the vitamin E acetate that's now in these vaping solutions that people are inhaling, and it's causing illness. But fine particulate matter generally is like magnetite and iron and actual metals that we inhale through the air that are created in the burning of coal, in vehicle exhaust, sloughed off from any number of industrial processes, and it's like literally metal. For example, magnetite. They've been able to identify magnetite in the brains in Mexico City of toddlers, essentially, because these particles are so small, they're able to they enter circulation easily, and they pierce the blood-brain barrier, and they're able to actually accumulate in the hippocampus, where they cause inflammation. They've been shown to cause the aggregate of plaques that are associated with Alzheimer's disease, but in young people. Amyloid beta is one of the primary proteins that's involved in Alzheimer's disease. It's the backbone of the plaque that characterizes the disease. And amyloid beta is not necessarily a bad thing. It's bad when it creates these plaques that gunk up the brain. But I think the current sort of understanding of what this protein is meant to do in the brain, it's sort of there to actually initially protect it against inflammatory insults.
How's it protecting it? So is it like finding a particle or a virus and like wrapping it like a pearl does a grain of sand? Is it something like that?
That's a very good analogy. Yeah, it basically encapsulates it. And the research that they're doing on this is coming, I think, predominantly out of Harvard. They're showing this with the herpes virus, that people that have herpes, or people with Alzheimer's, generally they can find herpes in the brain. And that amyloid seems to basically like protect the brain. It's initially trying to protect the brain from this virus, and so it wraps it up, and it causes the proteins to cross-link and aggregate and misfold and form these plaques. So the same thing conceivably can happen with and it seems to be happening with fine particulate matter. And there is an interesting relationship between exposure to air pollution and one's risk for developing Alzheimer's disease. And though Alzheimer's disease is the most common form of dementia, it's not the only form of dementia. And my mom lived throughout her life in New York City, which is, now I think the air is a bit cleaner, but it's a city that for many years has had problems with air pollution. So yeah, that's a major one. I mean, clean air. And there are a few things that you can do to protect yourself against this. I think, getting a good air filter, especially in your personal breathing space. There was a great book. I'm forgetting. Oh, Dr. Wolverton. I think his first name was Bill Wolverton. He was a NASA research scientist, and he looked at plants, and he analyzed the rate at which plants are able to sort of clean the air. And he did this because you could essentially put a plant on board of a space shuttle and provide clean air to the astronauts. And so
they actually did that?
I don't know if they actually went through with it. They may be, but that's what he was studying with his time at NASA. And since then, he's written a book. I believe the book is called How to Have Clean Air, or How to Clean Your Air, or something like that. Or How to Plant Fresh Air, or Grow Fresh Air, something like that. It's a really cool book. I cite it in mine. And he basically lists out all the plants in ascending order. And I have the top 10 in my book, Genius Foods, or The Genius Life. plants that are basically able to clean the air for you, which is great. They're able to reduce levels of formaldehyde, which leaches out into the air from, wood furniture and carpets and couches and things like that. Another big problem for people, well, I would say plastic-related compounds are some of the most common everywhere compounds that we're just inundated with on a day-to-day basis, and they do affect the way that our hormones work. Compounds like phthalates and bisphenol A are what are called xenoestrogens.
Is bisphenol A BPA?
BPA,
Got it.
yes. Although now consumers are starting to get wise to the potential dangers of BPA, and so you'll see a lot of products that are BPA free, but that doesn't mean that they're free of chemically similar compounds like BPS and BPF. So essentially, it's created this chemical game of whack-a-mole where as soon as consumers become aware of a compound, industry is very quick to pivot and then they're able to sort of hijack the fears of the consumer to then make health claims about their products. Like this product
no BPA.
No BPA.
Yeah.
But a lot of them...
Do you avoid plastic like at every conceivable turn?
I try to without driving myself too crazy. So if I'm traveling and I can't find water in a glass bottle, then yeah, I will drink from plastic, even though I know it's not ideal. Because the reality is you can't escape these compounds. So trying to is a completely futile effort. So by you not drinking, avoiding drinking water when you're thirsty because it may come in a plastic bottle doesn't make a lot of sense because we're just inundated with these compounds. The best that we can do is to minimize our exposure to them and to help our bodies to facilitate the purging of toxins that we have already accumulated.
So how do we do that?
So when it comes to detoxing, a lot of people are spending money on overpriced teas and supplements and things like that. But the reality is, what I like to talk about the 3 Ps of detoxing. It's peeing, pooping, and perspiring. And this is literally, crucially important because whether it's heavy metals or phthalates or parabens or BPA or PFAS chemicals, which basically include... it's an umbrella category for the chemicals that are sometimes used to create Teflon pans or nonstick pans, which are also incidentally found in dental tape. So if you're using dental tape, not dental floss, you want to switch over.
Dental tape?
Yeah.
I haven't heard of dental tape.
Like it's the Glide dental floss that's like...
It's actually called dental tape. It says it right on
dental tape, yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so no dental tape, all dental floss.
All dental floss. It's going to be better at cleaning your teeth and you're not
using Teflon essentially.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. And they've shown that can actually enter circulation. Huh. You want to be very careful with your...
Do you cook with Teflon? What do you cook with?
I don't know. I use a cast iron pan. I use stainless steel.
It doesn't stick?
Not if you cook with them the right way.
What about ceramic?
Ceramic can be good.
Do they make ceramic frying pans?
They do make ceramic frying pans. Yeah, yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
You just want to be careful with the
I'm
coated.
eating the most Teflon ever.
I
don't use dental tape.
Yeah,
but I cook in Teflon pans nonstop.
There is a product, and I have no affiliation with them whatsoever, but they're called Green Pan, and I've discovered them on my own, and I've purchased 1 or 2 of their pans with with my own money. They claim to not have any of these chemicals in them, and I think that they claim that they're free of all related compounds as well. So I think the jury is still out. But it may be a better option. I don't know. But generally, yeah, you want to support your body's own detoxification, and you can do that by eating in a way that's going to support digestive health. Consuming lots of vegetables, fiber in general, but especially cruciferous vegetables. I'm a big fan of because of their ability to stoke our body's own detox pathways.
And I heard you talking about one of your favorite is baby broccoli sprouts.
Broccoli sprouts.
I've never even heard of broccoli sprouts.
Yeah, baby broccoli.
I've heard of broccolini, but this is different.
Broccolini, yeah. So you've got baby broccoli at the those are the infants, and then you've got broccolini, and then you've got full adult grown broccoli. I think that's pretty much how it goes. Don't quote me, but broccoli sprouts are baby. It's it's like 3 or 4 day old broccoli, and you can just buy broccoli seeds and you can.
What is it high in that makes it so useful?
So broccoli sprouts are very high in a compound called sulforaphane. In fact, 1 pound of broccoli sprouts are the equivalent of 100 pounds of broccoli in terms of their capacity to produce this compound.
And this is useful in the detoxification?
Yeah. So it's a very effective upregulator of a gene pathway in our bodies called the NRF2 pathway, which is a detoxification pathway. It increases levels of glutathione in the body, which is our body's master antioxidant and detoxifier.
When something is detoxifying, because whenever I hear people talk about detoxifying, they sound crazy.
Yeah.
So what is actually happening in detoxification?
Well, for one, you're basically telling your liver to create more glutathione.
Which does what? So if amyloid plaques go into the brain, surround a virus or a particle, I get that. Yeah. I understand how that works.
You can't detox viruses. You can't detox amyloid, but you can detox certain of these compounds that are fat soluble.
But what are they doing?
Well, the liver makes them water soluble. Okay. So they can be more easily excreted. And the liver.
But what are they doing? Are they running around grabbing things? Like what are they removing from the body? Like this poor kid in Mexico City who's breathing in metals, that's crossing the blood-brain barrier. The only way is to lock that up, or can that be detoxified? I know people get heavy metal poisoning, and then they supposedly detoxify. What is actually happening at a cellular level?
They can be detoxified. So
something is going and grabbing the metal?
Certain heavy metals can be chelated by your body.
Chelated is that wrapping procedure?
It's when you basically wrap a heavy metal and you excrete it.
Okay, and you're wrapping it in glutathione?
You could wrap it in glutathione. They could be disarmed by selenoproteins, which are selenium-based enzymes in the brain. This happens with mercury. So for each compound, there's sort of like a different way in which they're detoxed. Some compounds are not as easily excreted through our poop and our pee, and we have to sweat them out, like cadmium. Cadmium is a good example of that. So it's different for every compound, and I don't pretend to know the detox route for every.
But the liver is sending out the things.
Yeah.
The things, you like how technical that is?
Yeah.
It's sending out the things that are going to go and grab all these, and it somehow takes it to, if it's cadmium, it's taking it to sweat. If it's something else, it's pee. If it's something else, it's poop. Like that's the...
Yeah. I mean, so your liver has two detox phases. There's phase 1 detox and phase 2. And in the first phase, I believe, it's making these compounds water soluble so that they can be more easily excreted.
It's making the toxins water soluble.
Yeah.
Somehow.
Yes. And then, they can be excreted by the kidneys in our pee, or, they get excreted into our bile, which is another reason why, I think that when my mom had this bilirubin, this bile backup into her circulation, it was essentially causing a buildup of toxins because that's one major route of exit for these toxic chemicals. And that's why eating fiber is so important, because it basically traps them in your poop. And this also actually happens, interestingly, with cholesterol. So a lot of people struggle with, we could debate high cholesterol versus low cholesterol and what that really means from the standpoint of health. But I think if you have very high cholesterol, it's probably a marker that something is not going right in the body.
Give me what do you consider high? Like, to talk about cholesterol intelligently, don't you have to start talking particle size and fluffiness and all that stuff?
Yeah, so I talked about that quite a bit in Genius Foods, and I think that your normal calculated LDL that you get on a blood lab, it's not super telling when it comes to your overall health. I think, and I'm not a medical doctor, so I don't diagnose or talk about an individual's risk for heart disease or anything like that. But yes, I think the particle number, generally speaking, gives you a better sense of the recycling machinery in the body and how effectively your liver is recycling lipids like LDL cholesterol, which, if allowed to back up in the blood and linger in the blood for too long, it's more prone to oxidation. It's more prone to becoming a small and dense particle that can more easily get stuck to the endothelium, which is the lining of your blood vessels, and then form what ultimately becomes a foam cell, and that's the beginning of an atherogenic plaque. But cholesterol is actually used to create bile acids, which is how we digest and assimilate fats through the digestive tract. And your liver uses cholesterol that it sucks out from circulation to create these bile acids, and it just gets squirted essentially by your gallbladder into your GI tract. And when you consume certain types of fiber, I've actually become interested in psyllium husk, because psyllium husk has been shown to actually do this. It's able to sequester cholesterol so they can't be reabsorbed back in to circulation at the lower end of the small intestine. And that's the exact same mechanism by which fiber can help us better excrete environmental toxins. I think it's also one of the reasons
because
why.
the cholesterol grabs it and then the fiber grabs the cholesterol?
Because the fiber just grabs the bile acids, which contain these toxins. So it basically disallows for the reabsorption of toxins that are contained in the bile. And I think it's probably one of the reasons why dietary fiber consumption is associated with reduced risk for certain cancers. So breast cancer is one of them. Eating more vegetables allows
because the toxin is not reabsorbed into the body.
Yeah. Hey, if you like that video, you need to check out this one here, and I'll see you there.
If something is challenging to love, then it's probably an indication that there's work there for you. You know, so it's like the harder something is to love, it's like, well, there's probably like lessons here. There's probably something. This is probably exactly where you need to be.